and ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Thai Institute of Directors, I, as spokesman, would like to welcome all of you to the IoT Director Briefing, and this morning with the topic of digital transformation, stories and strategies for success. We hope you find the program engaging and fruitful. And I'd like to give a special thank you Kasikon Bank Public Company Limited, PTT Public Company Limited, and the Siam Cement Public Company Limited for supporting the event. And ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that your mobile phone is in the silent mode during the session. Before we begin the session, our CEO here is very pleased to deliver his welcome address to all of us here. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcome our CEO, Kun Gulavet Jayawatanawi.
Hello, can you hear me in the back? Yes. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Gulavet Jayawatanawi, the CEO of IoT. The show up today is beyond our expectation. Not only the number, but normally we only have a few frequent participants. This time it proved that when we do something different, which is about digital transformation too, it could gain different result, a better result. Of course, you come to listen to Chris also. But anyway, before we go into this topic, which is very important, digital transformation, how to get it right, the success story, how to get it right. I would like to talk about a little bit about the direction of IoT. Of course, IoT has been here for 20 years, as you know, and in the past we do a lot of training. But from now on, you see something different. You see IoT as a member-to-member, member-for-member platform. You see more of the platform like this that member can come and learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because IoT recognize that directors are not the role only. We are human beings. As a human being, we have to go through the journey of learning. So that's why in the past few months, many of you might have been to some of our events. Like the beginning of the year, we had 5 training in the year of the pigs. Then we had PM 2.5 camp on Untitled Bangkok. Then we start talking about let's equip our directors with strategy. So today is the first time that we organize the event around strategy, but not the last time. Today, Chris is going to be talking about digital transformation. Next month, we will have Dr. Tanai talking about strategic foresight, because we always have more than one futures. Let's explore those many futures and which futures should we build our strategic planning upon. We are also going to have some more events, such as our National Directors event. It's on 24th of July. Please don't write down, because at the end of this session, we are going to introduce them formally. And that is the annual conference by IoT. So we are going to use the topic board of the future. If our board has to be prepared for the future, what should our board look like? It's not only about disruption, it's about culture and behavior. So please bear with us, and please follow our activities from now on. As we mentioned, we are going to turn IoT beyond classroom into member-for-member and member-to-member platform. So I would like to end the introduction right now, and ask Chris Asospan to introduce Chris in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, let's start our session with our special guest speaker here, Chris Hafner, founder of Transversant Limited and our strategy professional. Chris is a global strategy consultancy helping enterprises navigate complexity in an uncertain world. He is a globally respected contributor to the field of strategy and strategic management and international speaker on the topics of strategy, innovation and leadership. And this morning, Chris will share his expertise and experience with us in digital transformation, stories and strategies for success. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcome Chris Hafner.
Good morning. So this morning I woke up and I turned on the news, so I'm watching the hotel I'm at, BBC News and CNN. And on CNN News they had a commercial for a program that's upcoming around Thailand and Thailand's digital ambitions. Has anyone seen this on CNN? It's really interesting. They said they expect by 2022, it's not very far away. By 2022, they said Thailand, 60% of Thailand's GDP would be digitalized. What does that mean? Does anybody know what that means? I'm not quite sure I know what that means, right? 60% of your GDP will be digitalized. Now, it's interesting that they use the word digitalized and not digitized. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The other number they quoted was 70 billion US dollars will be spent in IT. So they're talking about this concept of Thailand and digital transformation and GDP and spending in IT. I will tell you, digital transformation is not about technology. Technology is a part of it, but transformation is much broader than that. So today, we're going to talk about, first, what do we mean by transformation? It's a word we use all the time. It conjures up certain connotations in our minds, butterflies, caterpillars, and those kinds of things. But what do we really mean when we say transformation? Because I think there's a chasm between what we mean and what we say, and then what's actually felt down at the fingertips of the organization. We'll talk about building a compelling call to action. Why should I change? Why now? Why digital transformation? Because it's a cool fad, it sounds good, everyone else is doing it. Is that why we should do it? Okay. What's your compelling call to action? And different organizations and different industries will have a different call to action, if you have one. And then we'll talk about the digital transformation journey. Right? What are these major steps you need to go through to accomplish and truly transform? And then we're going to share some stories from a variety of industries. And some of these transformations have been incremental and internal. Some have been departmental, and some have been truly transformational. One of which is very near and dear to my heart, which is a company that I was a part of, and we completely transformed the company. We literally went from caterpillar to butterfly, and I'll share that story with you. So first of all, when we think about the concept of digital, this is what typically ends up happening, right? Anybody know what these are? Russian dolls, correct, yes. So Russian dolls. So think of this in financial services, right? So, the big doll, well, this is our branch, right? Oh, now we're going to move to get customers on the phone, right? That's the next doll. And then we're going to design an experience for the desktop. And then we're going to design an experience for the laptop. And then way down here, we're going to design an experience for the smartphone. So just shrinking the experience, right? That's leveraging technology, but that's not truly transformational. When I was a young man, I had my first bank account. They had what they call a passbook, right? It almost looked like a passport. And you took it into the bank. It was roughly this size. Right? And you take it to the bank and make a deposit, and they would stamp it. And that book contained a series of debits and credits, right, that summed up to a balance. Then came online banking. I can go to a screen, go online, right, and see a series of debits and credits that summed up to a balance. And then I could go to an ATM machine and make a deposit, make a withdrawal, get a piece of paper out roughly this size. They gave me a series of debits and credits that sums up to a balance. Today, we have digital banking on our smartphone. A device about this size that gives me a series of debits and credits that sums up to a balance. And that's not transformation. That's digitization. But it's not necessarily transformation. So how can we transform? What can we do to transform financial services in a digital age? We'll take a look at that today. So, transformation. What do we mean by transformation? Anybody want to share their thoughts on what they think transformation is? So,
Change in a significant way.
Change in a significant way. So when we talk about transformation, this is the spectrum. And when I work with organizations, right, and we'll go out at different levels of the organizations, starting at the board, moving down to the executive management team, then going into senior management, and then into line management. And the further down you go, and you talk to people about their organization's digital transformation initiative, what are you really doing? What does it really feel like? And you let them think about this spectrum, how do you think the responses fall? At the board, and sometimes at the executive level, you get some 4s. Very rarely do we get a 5, right? This concept of true metamorphosis, this image that we typically conjure up when we think about transformation. Most tend to sit at 1 or 2. Most respondents really come in and say, well, actually, now that I think about it, what we're doing is just a bit of continuous improvement. It's just incremental change. Yeah, we're talking about digital transformation, but it's really all about improving revenues or taking out some cost. It's not truly about transforming our value proposition. Or it's just about, can we do more? Can we create greater value by doing more with what we have? Can we reach more people through the smartphone than we can through our branches? That's not truly transformation. But there's nothing wrong with taking on those initiatives. Digitizing, digitalizing, leveraging technology to improve the experience. But that's not really transformation. So, once we understand what we mean by transformation, and as an organization, we align on it. So if you want to use the word transformation in the context of re-engineering, there's nothing wrong with that, other than to know everyone needs to know that's what you mean. Because you will set an expectation down at the fingertips of the organization, and they will know, there's a term we call it, you hear about, they'll call BS on that, right? I won't explain it, you probably know what that means, right? Which is, I know you're saying transformation, but it's just continuous improvement, right? This is just some re-engineering efforts. They'll know that. So at least be intellectually honest with the entire organization about what you mean by that. You can rally around it, but know what you mean. And be clear from the top all the way down to the fingertips of the organization. The next step is to build a compelling call to action, right? Marketing folks call this the CTA. What's your CTA? Why should I do this? Why now? Why are we doing this anyway? We can talk about transformation, but we need to create clear, compelling reasons for the organization to want to embark on this journey. We need to answer the question, why now? What's different? Why should we do this today? So there's 5 different realms of which you can consider how you might frame up your call to action. So the first one is just this concept of getting fit, which aligns with the continuous improvement concept, right? This is, images of just getting healthier, getting better, making some improvements, perhaps a lot of carrot and stick activity happening within the organization. Nothing wrong with it, but that's one way to frame a call to action. This is why we need to do this now. Just do more, do it faster, do it cheaper. The next one is this concept of burning platform, right? To convey a sense of urgency that we are fundamentally under threat. So for example, the world's 3 largest consumer credit rating agencies, right, Experian, TransUnion, those organizations, they know they are under threat. They feel they have a burning platform. They are making bets across a wide variety of organizations because they can see that in the next 3 to 5 years, their service proposition is obsolete. With the advent of artificial intelligence technologies, do I really need to pay a third-party agency to give me a credit score for an individual? I can start to make that assessment myself. Right? Sharing of data, open banking technology in certain markets. So they see the writing on the wall. They're being driven through the concept of a burning platform. The next one is this concept of a revolution, right? A social movement, right? That there's an establishment that needs to be overthrown, right? This concept of revolution. And this is the realm of areas like fintech and insurtech and regtech, right? The digital challenger banks in certain markets, right? Coming up to challenge those old, established financial services institutions. And we're going to be the challenger bank, right? An all-digital bank. And the next one is the concept of reformation, right? Good or bad, right? There's something wrong that needs to change. So this may be the area of med tech and health tech, right? The democratization of healthcare. So how can we use technologies like 5G, the Da Vinci surgery robot, augmented reality technologies to improve healthcare outcomes across the globe? So a good friend of mine, Dr. Shafi Ahmed, he's the world's, they call him the world's most watched surgeon. But he led the first tri-continental virtual bowel cancer surgery. So he virtually scrubbed in from London, a consultant scrubbed in from Atlanta, and the surgery was actually performed in Delhi, India. And using AR, VR technology, wearing headsets, these surgeons could collaborate and use robotic technology to perform a successful bowel cancer surgery. And then this last one, this is where a lot of organizations tend to reside, is this concept of an incubator, right? How do we foster transformation? So this is when an organization decides we need to be more innovative, we need better ideas, so we're going to create our innovation team or an innovation function. And we're going to give that group a pot of money to go and come up with great ideas. And it's not a bad thing, but it's rarely successful. And it's rarely successful for this reason, because the way it's typically set up is this tech-savvy innovation group, they get together, they come up with a lot of ideas, they go talk to various parts of operations in the business, and they understand what problems they have. They go back to their incubator, lab type of environment, and they come up with really innovative solutions. And then they go test it out with those operational functions. And the operational functions say, this is great. And what happens next? The way these functions are typically set up is now you have to go sell that to that operational function. And that's where the innovation dies, right? That's where the transformation dies. Because that operational function, they don't have the budget for it. I don't have the funding for this. Where am I going to get the money from? It's great that we can use drones to detect what's out in the fields and which weeds we want to focus on in terms of targeting with certain chemicals so we're not spraying the entire field. We understand the efficiencies and the environmental impact, but I don't have the budget for it. And so it typically dies at death. I describe it as the antibodies of the organization come in and reject the innovation. So we need to be thinking about how to create that compelling call to action, that compelling message. And the way we do that is through a very simple formula. Now there's many ways, and marketing folks are great at this, but this is just a simple way to create a compelling call to action. So here's the formula. It's D times B times F must be greater than R. Now you can use this to create call to action externally to customers, internally, advocating for a project. You can even use it to advocate for a promotion. It's fairly universal. So the D, The D starts with a level of discontent. If I'm going to do something different, if there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing today, why should I do anything different? So there has to be a clearly defined level of discontent. There has to be something wrong with the way they are, with the way things are today. Now it doesn't have to be negative, but it has to be a level of discontent that I can feel, right here and here, but probably a little more here than here. So that level of discontent, first step. Once that's identified, then you move on to the next, the V. Now we have to create a compelling vision for what the future could be like if things change to alleviate the problems that we found in that level of discontent. And it needs to be tangible. Storytelling works really well. This is what's wrong with the way things are today, and let me tell you how it could be. Imagine a world where everyone has access to basic financial services. Imagine a world where healthcare is democratized. And it doesn't matter where you reside in Thailand, right? Healthcare is only a mobile phone app away from you. Help is as close as the app on the phone in your pocket or your purse. That's what it can be like. But the problem with a compelling vision is sometimes it can be too far out. It doesn't feel real. So that's where the F comes in. And F is for first, and it's the credible first move towards that compelling future. So I need to be discontent with the way things are today. I need to have a clear vision for what it would be like in the future. But I also have to believe there's a way to get there. What are some of the first steps we can take to get there? And all of that, right, must be greater than R, and that's the resistance to change. And whether that's the resistance of a consumer to do something differently, to buy a new product or service, whether it's the resistance of an internal group of people in the organization to change behaviors, change their way of working, take additional training courses. And you'll notice this is not a sum, this is a product. D multiplied by B multiplied by F must be greater than the resistance to change, which means it implies none of the variables on the left side of that equation can be zero. Anything multiplied by zero is zero. So we have to tick all of those boxes. So we need to understand what we mean by transformation. We need to create a compelling call to action. And then we need to start going on this journey. So what does this transformation journey look like? It starts with digitization. You cannot embark upon a digital transformation journey without going through your digitization projects first. Then you can embark upon your digitalization experiments and capabilities. And then you can start to consider how you can completely transform. So I use those words digitization and digitalization, right, in a unique way. And so what's the difference between these two? Digitization is quite simply moving from an analog format to digital format. Now we'll see a variety of examples when we go through some of these cases. But in the most simplistic terms, think of it as going from paper documents to Microsoft Word, right, to text. So imagine you are a law firm and you're in the intellectual property business. And if you're anybody here in the IP business, law firm, intellectual property. So intellectual property attorneys, hard to come by, in high demand. So these firms are constantly asking, how do I compete for talent? How do I get better talent? How do I get the next generation of IP attorneys? You step back and say, well, that's one way to solve the problem. But let's talk about digital. And can we do something a little bit different? Can we leverage the talent that you have using technology in a slightly different way. So the first step is you go into that firm and think about all of the contracts they have. Many of them paper-based contracts. So the first step is to move those from paper to digital, right? That's digitization. So digitization is typically performed through clear identified projects. It's fairly straightforward. So I can use OCR, optical character recognition technology, and computer vision to take those analog documents and make them digital. That's digitization. So digitization is the what. Digitalization is changing the how. So digitalization is, now that I have these documents digitized, how can I work differently? So in the case of this law firm, what we can do differently is we can use natural language processing, machine learning, and computer vision technologies, and create algorithms that can pour through thousands of legal documents and identify those clauses that have the greatest risk, or maybe exceptions, or need those IP attorneys to review. So rather than reading through 478 pages of the legal document, and 1,000 of those, I can have served up to me the 40 documents and the 10 clauses that I really need to focus on, creating much greater efficiencies. Now, I use that in the context of an IP law firm. How could you use that in your business? Anybody here acquire a company? Have you ever gone through an acquisition? Acquired another company? And what's one of the first things you want to do is understand what are the risks now that I've made this acquisition. And the legal teams pour in and look at all your customer agreements, look at all your supplier agreements. Why do you need to look at all your customer agreements? What promises did the company I just acquired made that I am now having to fulfill? In the case of suppliers, most favored nations clauses, what kind of pricing do I have versus the pricing that the acquired company has? That's a long and tedious process that can be highly accelerated through the process of digitization and digitalization, transforming the way you do your contractual reviews in M&A. So when we think about an example of digitization versus digitalization, so if I have this text in paper format, I can't do much with it. But if these phrases are in digital format, I can do some interesting things with them. So the first statement says, we can better manage our expenses. Does everybody understand the context of that? We can better manage our expenses. Another employee might say, well, we can improve on our costs. And yet another employee might have an opinion that says, we should not grow revenue at the expense of profit margin. Now, what do all three of those phrases have in common? They're all dealing with this concept of cost or expense. But would you group them up into the same category? Probably not. So digitization would give you the ability to say, hey, the top phrase, we can better manage our expenses, and the bottom phrase, we should not grow revenue at the expense of profit margin. We can group these two phrases together because they've been digitized. So things like word clouds. But these two phrases do not have the same meaning. It's through digitalization, using natural language processing, topic analysis, sentiment and emotion analysis, machine learning, and neural networks, that we can discern in these phrases that we can better manage our expenses and we can improve on our costs. These are related topics and themes. Sentiment coming from the organization. And that's a very different group of thoughts and inputs than the third, which is we should not grow revenue at the expense of profit margin. The power of digitalization. So we'll walk through some examples of digital transformation. So the first one is EY. Oddly enough, EY was a client of mine. So side story, absolutely unbelievable experience. 2014, get called into Mark Weinberger's office, not to meet with Mark, but to meet with his team, and basically they're stuck. Now, at the time, I ran a fairly small consulting firm. We were about $30 million US in revenue, so not very big, about 150 employees across the US and Europe. Small firm, and so you think, why would EY need help with a small consulting firm? Now, in fairness to them, think about it. Where are their best people? Out in your companies, generating revenue, helping you, right? That's kind of the shoemaker's children when you're trying to do something internally and trying to get the best resources. So they were stuck in their transformation, their Global 2020 vision to become a better working world as part of their vision to create a better working world for their customers. Now the funny part about this story was it took about 6 months. So EY, right, it's a brand, and Mark Weinberger, at the time he was the CEO of EY, but let's be clear, the amount of power he has as the CEO of EY is zero, right? It's a partnership. It's thousands of companies licensing that brand, and it's all the partners who generate revenue that truly have all the power. So his effort to try to transform EY was incredibly challenging. We think of organizations as having a pyramid, right? CEO on top. If you get the heart and mind of the CEO, you can kind of cascade that down. Well, in his case, that pyramid was flipped upside down, right? You have to get in the hearts and minds of every senior partner across the globe before you can actually make a global transformation in an organization like that. So a very complex organization. So they don't hire consultants. Makes sense, right? They couldn't figure out how to hire. They didn't have an agreement ready to bring a consultant in. They had plenty to bring in a subcontractor that they would put out on a client project. So it was a very interesting experience. So worked with the head of their global shared services. And eventually, as we were having conversations through this transformation journey, we started talking about artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, chatbots. And eventually, we 2 years later, we formed a new entity within EY, within their global shared services group called Automation Central. And so Deepak Swaroop was tasked, he was a senior partner at EY, and he was tasked with building a capability to digitize and then digitalize a lot of the internal services that EY provides for their shared services group out to their partner community. So one of the things they did was they created a chatbot, and what partners have to do out there selling with accounts is they have to provide clients with follow-up information. And they have a risk management services group internally that partners would typically send an email, get a request for this information. The RMS group would take a look at that. They would ensure they had the right collateral and the right language and they had the right branding. It was most current and most up to date. A fairly tedious process. One that was absolutely ripe for automation. So they were able to automate that process through RPA technology, robotic process automation technology. And good news was all of that content was already digitized. So it was easier for them to digitalize the process. Then they went and they wanted to go digital in terms of delivery. So they created a chatbot. And then they created the voice capability. So voice to text, and then text back to voice. So that partner could conclude the meeting, get in his or her car, and simply, the equivalent of Siri for EY, say, please send XYZ to client ABC. And within about 30 minutes, the client has something in their inbox. Now, a couple years later, Deepak called me and he was really proud of 3,000 chatbots. The deployment of RPA technology has really expanded. Chris, this has been a wonderful journey for us. But he wasn't sure what next. So what do we do next? And so we spent a little bit of time together. And so through both the voice and the chat, we said, Deepak, you have untapped value sitting in all of this text data, right, coming from the folks on the road. And so we ran some experiments. Because what we know about consultants is in those big firms, they travel a lot. There's peaks and valleys, right? You get through burnout, right? Long days, big project, things are due, right? High levels of frustration. And what we started to do was we started to apply sentiment and emotion analysis. And we intersected those two concepts of sentiment and emotion so that we could understand how employees were communicating. So that we could discern through machine language and neural networks, we could discern when they were getting more frustrated, the types of words they were using, how they were communicating, the speed at which they were communicating. And so you could start to sense when different individuals over a period of time were starting to get a little more elevated, right? Getting a little more frustrated, or some getting a little more, what we call it, depressed, sad. And so we can use that information to proactively suggest to partners and their teams that maybe you should take a break. So from an HR perspective, you can get the best out of your people. So moving from just trying to be efficient, saying what's the realm of possibilities. And they're currently experimenting with this capability today, and they're having great success in the UK market. So they plan to test it in the UK market and then eventually launch that globally. So there's one example of going from digitization to digitalization and then leveraging that further. Now everyone's familiar with this story, right? And the story we typically hear is that, Netflix beat Blockbuster. The famous quote about Blockbuster saying, "Oh, we're never going out of business, right? People, there's something about someone wanting to walk into a store and read the back cover of a VCR or DVD case." But that's not really the whole story. The story starts out that way. It starts out about a transition around physical distribution first. So Blockbuster had physical stores for the distribution of physical media. Netflix came in and said, actually, we're going to go all DVD, forget the VHS tapes, because they were, well, the story goes, Reed Hastings had, didn't like paying late fees. So he was going to come up with a new business model. Advanced to, all right, how do we actually create a business around this? So they realized, they understand there's a prevalence of DVD player sales. And so DVD is going to be the dominant format, which makes it much easier to ship and mail. So Netflix's first business model was, I'll ship you 1 or 3 DVDs at a time, depending on how much you want to pay per month. Keep them as long as you want. And when you want the next one, just send one back in and we'll send the next one. How do I know which one to send you? Because you built a queue of films you wanted to see online. So from the very beginning, they were gathering data. Now, they knew they could turn that data into something more from the very beginning. So they captured what it was you were doing. They had what films you wanted, how long you kept them, which ones you re-rented, what categories the film were, right? So thinking way ahead, tagging all of that data and information in advance before they really knew what they could potentially mine from it. Now, so from there, Netflix overtook Blockbuster in the physical distribution realm. What made Blockbuster disappear was Netflix moved from physical distribution to digital distribution. And that was the fundamental change that Blockbuster could make. Now, for Netflix to do that, they had to be paying attention. So, Dr. Tanai, in a session, I believe next month, is going to be talking about strategic foresight. How do we look ahead? How do we pay attention to what the future might hold for us? So Netflix was paying attention to one industry in particular. Now, for those of you who've been in our strategic board masterclass this week, don't answer the question because you know the answer. I already gave you the answer. What industry was Netflix watching most closely? Any ideas? It's the industry you have to thank for streaming video. They poured hundreds of billions of dollars in research in bit rate transmission technology for streaming video to become mainstream. Do you know what the industry that was? It was the pornography industry. Absolute true story, right? An industry facing significant decline, right? Societal norms are changing in terms of acceptance of that types of behavior in society. And so they had to figure out a way to stay alive. And their way to stay alive was rather than you come to them, they can deliver content to you. And they had to mature the video streaming capability. That was the industry they were paying attention to, right? The foresight to look ahead and see what others are doing. Very important. So Netflix moves into digital distribution. Who then was under threat from Netflix? The cinema. That's right, yeah, the cinema. Right, there was all this talk about, well, no one's going to go to the cinema anymore because people are going to watch at home, eventually watch on their devices, watch anywhere, anytime. Now, this is a very good lesson for those in financial services, because we see similar stories to this today in financial services. So, who's under threat next? Excuse me? That's correct. Yes, the filmmakers, the manufacturers. Now, why did they come under threat? What would now, moving from physical distribution and understanding the power of capturing data and being able to make recommendations, moving to digital distribution, they knew what data gathering capabilities they needed. So what kind of information do you think that Netflix was gathering? What film you watched? Did you watch the entire film? If not, when did you stop watching it? Are you male or female? What's your individual demographics? What did you pause and rewind and watch 3 or 4 times? Oh, that's a really interesting scene. Somebody really liked that. You ever notice when you're watching one of these films, you can pause and see who the actors are? Now, when you know who the actor is, you rarely do anything. But if there's an actor that you haven't seen before that really piques your interest, you can go get more information on that actor. So they're understanding, who might the up-and-coming actors and actresses be that the public could be interested in? And they know about this sooner than anybody because they're gathering all this data. So they have the ability to then do what? They know the formula to building great content. And they move into content creation. And they were so successful in 2016, a Netflix production was nominated at the Cannes Film Festival. What happened in 2017? In 2017, the Cannes Film Festival said, Netflix is banned from the film festival. Unless you go through the distribution routes that traditional manufacturers go through, you cannot be a part of the Cannes Film Festival. Talk about an antiquated way of thinking. So they moved from analog distribution to digital distribution to manufacturing, content creation, because they digitized data, but then they digitalized that data to create new sources of value. But now what's happening today? Who's battling back? The manufacturers are. Disney's now announcing they're going to start their own streaming service. Same in music. So Spotify is now saying, hey, the manufacturers are saying, actually Spotify, we don't know if we want to renew the agreements the way we've had them in the past. So this is not just a story of digital transformation. What lesson can you learn from this if you're in financial services? So let's think about how a messaging service. Messaging services scare anybody in financial services? Today they do. 5 years ago they didn't. If somebody said to you, there's this WeChat messaging service thing, and I'm in retail banking, is that something that bothers me? It's a chat service, who cares? But suddenly, WeChat moves to WePay. And we can make payments through the messaging service. Suddenly you get concentration of distributor power. And that information flow, right, that data flow flowing through that channel, gives non-traditional competitors insights into unmet customer needs. And then comes WeBank, messaging service to bank. Apple Pay. So those in investment banking, who would have thought that investment bankers' performance would be relatively flat, but retail banking is where a lot of profits were. So you have Goldman Sachs saying we really need to find a way to get into retail banking. So they launched Marcus, and their fintech arm in the US, monitoring that and working alongside Apple. Apple through Apple Pay are able to identify unmet customer needs through digitization and digitalization. And then they recently announced this joint venture between Goldman Sachs and Apple to create an entirely new credit offering. So going on those digital journeys can create new sources of value. So you can look at Netflix as an interesting story about not catching up with the times, or Blockbuster kind of being stale and old. But there's more to the story than just that. It's thinking about how does power shift from manufacturers to distributors to retailers and back and forth again, right? And what actions and tactics can you take to ensure your business thrives? Okay, so it says boutique consulting firm. This was the consulting company I ran. Text is a little small, but I can explain this to you. So several years ago, as a small consulting firm, about 150 employees across North America and Europe, we stepped back, and I had a bit of a moral dilemma, because I found myself talking to clients and saying the same things all of the other management consulting firms were saying, which was, disrupt or die. You've got to go digital. Transform your business. You need a new business model. And I sat back and I thought, in consulting, our business model hasn't changed for 80 years since kind of the management consulting industry was found, gained inertia through McKinsey. It's kind of hypocritical to be doing this. So we sat back and we said, what would we do different if we started this industry today? What could we do different? And so we started with exploring customer needs. So there's a firm out of London called Source Global Research. They are to the management consulting industry what Gartner is to IT. And they said these four things, right? Customers want reach. Right? They want consulting firms to reach all parts of their organization, right? Get the pulse of the entire company. But they also want consulting firms to not spend so much time, because they have to, they want advice and guidance quicker, right? The pace of business is moving faster. And they want more value from consultants. Now, interestingly, nobody complained about quality. You find that hard to believe? Nobody complained about quality? I mean, well, we talk about it all the time, but it's kind of like this. Do you know what the world's #1 rated hamburger is in quality? McDonald's. Quality isn't about being good or being great. Quality is about consistently meeting your customers' expectations. So when you really dug into quality, you found that customers' expectations were lowered so much from management consulting firms that they no longer saw a problem with quality. So we said, is there something we can do differently? Could we use technology in a novel way? And if we could, what could we do to these four dimensions? And the answer we concluded was, yes, we could. So we partnered with Carnegie Mellon University out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the University of Oxford. And we did that, Carnegie Mellon from a technology perspective, University of Oxford from a social sciences perspective. And we hypothesized that our transformation would allow us to give customers greater reach, perform our consulting engagements in shorter time frames, that we could create greater value, and that we believe we could actually improve the quality of results. So this is what we did. We developed what we call the digital arsenal. And what it was it's a combination of using gamification, natural language processing, neurolinguistics, sentiment and emotion analysis to reach more people in the organization. So in a consulting, in a typical discovery engagement, management consulting, it's typically about 12 weeks long. And what do we do as consultants? Well, we come into your organization and we say, Janet, look, the first thing we need to do is, we need to interview people in your organization. We really need to talk to them, right? And so Janet says, oh yes, absolutely, and we come up with this list. Now, Janet's list that she and her management team are going to give me are what we call, they're the usual suspects. They're the same people everyone's told to go talk to, right? Now, if we're really good, we might, look at the org chart and say, well, actually, we might want to talk to some of these other people. So we agree. 12 weeks, it doesn't matter how big the organization is. 5,000 employees, 500 employees, 50,000 employees. The average number of individuals that a consulting firm will target is about 120 to 150 individuals. Why is that? Time and money are not infinite. If a client had an infinite amount of money, I could apply an infinite amount of resources to interview an infinite number of people, right, in a constrained period of time. Or if I had 5 years to take a team of 12 to go interview 50,000 people, I could go do that too, right? And so then it comes to planes, trains, and automobiles. Going out there, now what do we do as consultants? You know what we do? We come up with a list of basic questions. Consultants are trained. These are the open-ended questions you ask. And then you say things like, well, tell me a little more about that. Who else is impacted by that? It's the standard set of open-ended follow-up, right? It's a script. But there's nothing wrong with it, right? You need to ask those questions, and we take notes. And then what do? We come into some, typically, we were telling you we need a war room, Janet. We need a room carved out. We're giving our team can hunker down for the next 12 weeks, right? And we go through then we take all these notes, then we start writing out Post-it notes, and we throw them up on a wall, right? And then we start reading them. Remember the text we saw when we talked about expenses, right? And lowering costs, and we shouldn't sacrifice profits at the expense of revenue growth. We look at those things and you say, oh, well, these first two, that's about cost reduction, this is about revenue growth, this is about people, this is about technology, right? And then here's what happens. At about week 6, I schedule a meeting with Janet, and I say, Janet, so here's where we're at, right? And we do all this to come up with the top 10 themes. Maybe it's 12, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 5, right? But Janet, these are the top things we're hearing. Now, we're about 75% through the interviews we plan to go through, but I gotta tell you, Janet, I don't think we're gonna hear anything different. I mean, we're kind of hearing the same thing over and over. And Janet's gonna do exactly that. She's gonna nod, saying, yeah, that's probably true. And we're gonna agree that we don't need to conduct any of the further interviews. Now, the consultants aren't bad for doing this, right? They're genuinely, that is the information, that is what's being presented to them. That is a true and justified position to take. And Janet's not doing anything wrong. She's saying, yep, seems common sense to me. So we don't do any more interviews. Now, it happens to be good for me as the consultant because I've got a deliverable to hit in 6 more weeks. And it's good for Janet. You know why? Because she's going, ooh, yeah, I have to spend all those expense dollars. I like it, right? So we're all in agreement. It's all well and good. We present our findings, right? And after you do your first round of interviews to those 75, now that you know what you want to talk about, then you go back and you schedule an interview with maybe some subset of those folks. Sounds great. Until about 18 months later, when you're rolling out some grand initiative, right? And you show up to the general manager up in Chiang Mai, And he or she says, yeah, heard about this. I was on some list, you guys were going to talk to me, but then you didn't need to speak to me anymore. Right? So we start creating resistance to change because we in our race for efficiency, we left these folks out. And the other thing is, we want really novel ideas, really creative opinions. Okay? Why do we think that the top 10 things are the novel, really creative, innovative ideas coming out of the organization? What about the outliers? What about the three to five employees who happen to match the same demographics as your ideal customer, who work on the packaging line, who understand the hassle that customers have with opening your product? But that's not going to make the top 10. So we were able to deploy technology to create, in essence, what was a virtual interview, where we can go out and we could ask insightful questions. We used, I didn't know these people existed, I'll admit this. I didn't know this is a job. It's called a psychometrician. Now their job is, I love this job, right? I have to come up with answers as a consultant. Psychometricians, they write questions. Brilliant. But they write very well-crafted questions. Right? And a great question can change the world. So they write these questions. And so rather than write a question, take a poll, right, or a survey and just get some nominal answer back, through this technology, we're able to do what the consultants could do, which was ask that next level question. Questions like, it's 2023, you've been number 1 in your category, and you are now number 3. What did you do, what didn't you do, or what did your competitors do that created this shift? Very different question than how do we stay number 1. And then through gamification, as they're responding, right, they're incented to answer more. Right? Through inline natural language processing and natural language generation, we could do the same thing that consultants would do. And every Friday we run out of inventory. Oh, how often does that happen? Who else is impacted by that? All of this stuff that we can codify and digitalize to get these robust answers. We can then use natural language processing, topic, theme, and feature extraction analysis to pull this rich information out and map that to a theme hierarchy. So we could do that first 6 weeks in about 2 weeks. We could interview 5,000 people in 1 hour if they all have the same hour gift. And nobody has to get on a plane, train, or automobile. So we were able to deliver our engagements 25% less time. What's the difference to you in 4 weeks? That's 4 weeks of opportunity, of gain, of efficiency you never get back. It's pretty significant. It also had some other impacts on our business. So we'll talk about this in the realm of transformation. So this is what a typical 12-week consulting team would look like. Right? You've got the partner, and I only have half a partner there. You know how that works. They're there at the beginning, they're there at the end. So if you have an engagement manager, right, you have your subject matter experts, you have your analysts, and you probably have some research capability somewhere within the organization. So what we were able to do is, we said, wait a minute. The first bit of transformation for us in this digital journey was it transformed how we did our work. So it wasn't planes, trains, and automobiles in those first 6 weeks. It was using technology in the beginning, so it transformed how we did our work. What we didn't realize right away, but we quickly came to the conclusion was it transformed how we were organized. So machine learning, keyword is learning, which implies or begs the question, who's teaching it? So it wasn't technology that we put out to every consultant in the field. We said, actually, we need to have a central team of people who could evaluate the accuracy and work alongside the technology. So it changed how we were organized. So we had smaller field teams and built this centralized insights and innovation capability within our firm. So that we could leverage that technology and that capability across multiple engagement teams. So it fundamentally changed our scalability, how we were going to grow as an organization. So we have all these incremental bits of transformation. But here's where the metamorphosis happened. This happened in 2017. So you look at all these pieces, the pieces of our business. In red, that was our technology capability and the people that supported that. That organizationally, we realized we couldn't split across the entire organization, but we needed to centralize that capability. We have our black consulting on the right, human resources on the lower right, and yellow finance, blue on the lower left, marketing, business development. You have to have a team that's out there in the market selling on the upper left, solution management. These are our service line leaders. And here's where the transformation happened. I asked myself, wait a minute. There's a transformational opportunity here. There's an opportunity to move away from consulting and move into a platform business. Right? True metamorphosis. So now it's insights and innovation, a marketing and business development team that are selling this as a service capability to small and mid-sized consulting firms across the globe, so that they could provide greater value to their clients and unleash that potential on a global scale. So we could have stayed on the right side, holding this asset very tightly, but instead realized, actually, we have something very different. A lesson from Jeff Bezos, which was, I want to sell books online. And he could have held that really tightly. But what he realized was, he built the best e-commerce technology there was at the time. So rather than sell books, maybe I'm going to go sell technology that I built. Truly transformational, moving from one business to another. But what about manufacturing? Let's take a look at Industry 4.0.
What will manufacturing of tomorrow look like? Industrial parts are becoming smaller. Products get to market with less waste, faster, and on time. Even the most manual processes are turning towards automation. Innovations in machine vision, deep learning, and robotics are revolutionizing production lines and supply chains. Our machines now produce vast amounts of big data, accessible via the cloud. As machines and the information they produce become linked, new cyber-physical systems will spark a modern-day industrial revolution. This is Industry 4.0. In Industry 4.0, smart machines learn from their environments and take corrective actions to optimize production. These machines work independently of a central controller, collaborating and communicating with other devices. Industry 4.0 factories produce new organizational intelligence, which spreads across facilities and is accessible anywhere. The result? Nothing short of total transformation of production lines and business performance.
So what does that have to do with potato chips? Can you really digitally transform potato chips? Well, maybe not the chip, but perhaps the production of the chip. So in this case, this is a snapshot from U.S. patent on technology developed by a young engineer working in the Frito-Lay division. And what this young engineer did was, he said, you know what, I think there's a different way we can test the quality of the texture of a chip. Because if you have a chip, that texture is critically important. Right? It has to be rigid enough to withstand transportation, but it also has to have that crispy snap to it as well, right? So it can't be so rigid that it doesn't give you that experience, right? It's not just a taste experience, right? It's the visual, the sound. As an example, anybody ever open a bottle of Dasani water? So Dasani, Coca-Cola company. If you open a bottle of Dasani water, do it in a quiet room and listen. That's just water. But when you open a bottle of Dasani water, it's pressurized. A Now think about that from a branding perspective. Code, right? So sound, right? Visual, very important. So this young man developed a way to have a laser beam hit a chip, the sensor, right, a sound sensor that would listen to the sound of the laser beam hitting the chip, and from there developed an algorithm that correlated the sound into texture. That's digitization. Digitalization is then having the ability to take that information in line, real time, upstream in the manufacturing process, and modify production parameters so that you're constantly operating at the quality level that you need to operate at. Completely changing the concept of quality. And he didn't stop there. At a plant he was at, he noticed that there was a computer vision system used monitoring the production line of potatoes, and it was simply counting the potatoes and monitoring the size of them. At the same time, the plant was implementing about a $300,000 US weighing system on their conveyors so that they would understand the weight of potatoes going in. Leveraging what was already there, only investing in writing code, he created an algorithm leveraging those same computer vision investments to be able to determine the weight, using mathematical estimation, to determine the weight of the potatoes through the visual information only. Saving a little over $10 million in the United States production facilities alone that they would have invested in these $300,000 weighing systems. Now, at that same plant, what's next? They're also looking at a system that will monitor the peeling process. How a potato is peeled in the manufacturing process is critically important. Peel it too much to get a perfect chip with no brown in it, and your yield goes down. You don't peel it enough, your yield will go up, but the quality will suffer. So doing this again, in line, real time, being able to change production parameters. That's digital transformation. Quality 4.0, fundamentally changing. And when you think about that, it's not just about technology. The question is, what kinds of people in your quality organization, if you're in a manufacturing environment, are you going to need in the future? Very different skill sets. You need to be planning for those skill sets for the future. A couple of closing examples. Comcast Xfinity. This is a great story of digital gone wrong, or they thought it went wrong. So Comcast is a broadband media, cable TV provider in the US. And they deploy, like many of us do in our business, chatbots, because they wanted to divert customers to their chat service versus the phone service, right? Creating greater efficiencies in operations. And they had dismal performance, which was pretty standard across most organizations trying to implement chatbots. They implement them and they find that their number of phone calls doesn't go down the way whoever sold them the technology promised it would. So we came in and we had a conversation and we looked at how they deployed it. And one of the fundamental questions we asked was, did you digitize too early? Or did you digitize at all? So the first thing we did was we said, all right, let's step back and let's try this again. Let's not throw out this concept just yet. So one, let's get human beings behind the chatbot as opposed to algorithms to start. Now the interesting thing about the chat experience versus the voice experience, right, a human-to-human phone call interaction, is if you call somebody on the phone, you tend to, well, I'm having a bad day, there's a lot of extraneous conversation that might happen, right? A lot of useless information that gets shared in that dialogue. In a chat environment, people tend to focus very much on exactly what the issue is. There is behavioral differences in the way we approach a chat conversation, the voice conversation. So first we put humans behind it. So what we were getting is very targeted. So rather than going voice to text and analyze that data with a lot of extraneous information, humans to humans in a chat environment created much better foundational data. And then the algorithms could perform better, and we slowly moved to more automated processes. The other thing we did was we asked the question, what's your service level on your voice channel? So, oh, it's excellent. And our service levels all need to be here. Well, we said, all right, let's take a look at nudge theory. You're trying to get consumers to move from one channel to another. There's no discontent with the voice channel. So why would I move to the chat channel? So what we did was we went into the call center and we deliberately changed the service level. We brought it down a notch. And the call script started with, are you online now? Yes, I am. Because most consumers can't figure out who to call. It takes them forever to scan through the online site, find that phone number, finally place that call. So most consumers are online. Yes, I am online. Do you see that chat section in the lower right-hand corner of your screen? Yes, I do. I'm perfectly happy to take your case right now over the phone, but I can tell you if you go through that channel, you'll probably get a much faster result. So customers then get nudged to that chat channel, and they have a good experience. And then they tell others about that experience. And the next time they want to come in, they actually prefer the chat channel than picking up the phone and making that call. So it's about how do you shift with intention customers from one channel to another. And when we think about shifting customer behavior, in our course the other day, we saw 2 days ago, Walmart announced the first in-home delivery, and their CEO did it. So what the CEO did was he donned the backpack with the groceries in it, got on his bicycle, rode to the customer's home. I mean, he has a video camera on his chest so that the consumer can see him. He goes to the door, opens up his app. It's a digital door lock that allows him in. The digital door lock recognizes his face, right? Validates it's him. The consumer can watch him deliver the groceries. He literally goes into the home, puts groceries in the refrigerator, stocks the shelves, and walks back out. Now, in our Strategic Board Masterclass course, several of the participants said, oh, no way I'm letting a stranger in my home. Not gonna happen, right? In fact, he said, oh, I might try it. There's no way my wife is letting a stranger in our home. And I said, really? He's like, oh, absolutely not. I said, so he's originally from the US. I said, so you ever sold a home in the US? Yeah, I said, would you let strangers, actually, would your wife let a group of strangers into her bedroom to browse through her closet, through your cabinets, a group of strangers? No. She did when you sold your home, when the realtor put the lockbox on the door, brought a prospective buyer in, punched in the code to open the door, to get the key, to unlock your door, to bring a group of strangers into your home who are going to walk throughout every part of your home. So you let strangers into your home today. You do that because there is a level of value that you will obtain from letting them do that. So eventually, over time, if we see that the value trade-off is significant enough, we might let strangers into our home. But you think through that, right? It requires an entire ecosystem for that digital transformation to take hold. How successful will they be? Well, it's probably going to be dependent on the number of people who have digital door locks. And the number of people who have digital door locks will probably be dependent on the number of skilled laborers who are no longer mechanical in nature, but may need to have more electronic capabilities or programming capabilities. So when we think about transformation, we need to think about the entire ecosystem, not just our own organization. So last example, Commonwealth Bank. This is the largest bank in Australia. They went through a significant transformation effort in a variety of their areas, and we're going to talk about mortgages. So we started earlier, we talked about Netflix, and thinking about the future and where you want it to be, right? Plan for tomorrow, think big, start smart, scale fast. And so in working and transforming their mortgage experience, we started thinking about this concept of data being the new oil. Well, how valuable is oil? $65 US a barrel. And I doubt anyone here has bought a barrel of oil. You may have traded, but I doubt you purchased a barrel of oil because it's not very valuable. The valuable part of oil comes in the refining process and the immense value we can extract out of that oil. So the same is true for data. So when they went through their mortgage transformation and we were looking at how to design the digital mortgage experience, we looked at things like how a consumer might want to go online and see their mortgage. Now, most banks give the customer all of the information digitized. Things like, here's your balance, here's the debits and credits, and you might also display the home value, oh, this is my home's worth, and the interest rate. Now, if you're giving your customer all of that information, you should, but you're giving away rich, robust data. And the value trade-off we created was we said we need to make the customer work just a little bit to get a couple bits of information. So we'll give them their current home value, and we'll give them their interest rate, but they're going to have to hover over it, or they're going to have to tap it to see it. That's it. That hover over and that tapping gave us rich analytics. We can predict which consumers, how often do you care about the value of your home? How often do you care about your interest rate? Probably only when you're looking to take out a home equity loan or further advance. When you're considering remortgaging to another lender, or when you're considering moving homes. So they could create algorithms that could predict what potential consumer behavior was going to happen based on what bits of data they were touching, hovering over, or tapping. And then you create bespoke offers to retain those customers. So digitization, digitalization can lead to transformation. But transformation, we said, is not about technology. How does consumer behavior have to transform? How do our organizations have to transform? What kinds of capabilities will we need in the future to succeed? It's not just about technology. So hopefully today we talked a little bit about the importance on the alignment on what we mean by transformation, understanding that we really need to build a compelling call to action. Why are we doing this and why now? We talked a little bit about the journey and the differences between digitization and digitalization. And then we went through a few examples of digital transformation. Thank you very much for your time this morning. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to take this. Yes.
Is critical first move. How often have you been engaged to that point? And how significant is this critical first move when you are engaged in different projects?
It's incredibly significant because you have to celebrate the quick wins. You have to celebrate those early wins because you have to create a sense of belief in the organization that we can get there. So it's while you create the initiative around that credible first move, you have to sometimes overinvest in ensuring that you'll be successful, and then you have to communicate and market that success to the organization to create a real inspired organization to move forward and change.
Did you have good experiences at that stage?
Yes, very good experiences. Yeah. Many organizations do have early wins. They just don't celebrate them and they haven't identified them as that credible first step. So sometimes just reframing what you already have can be very valuable. Yes, please.
Yeah, I also have a similar question on this formula. For example, on the issue of discontent, we know that a number of organizations suffer very much in the comfort zone. How do you get people to get out of that? And when you talk about vision, is it something that you expect from the top, or is it something that you expect, the people in the organization to help come up to formulate that vision? And of course, if people are very much in the comfort zone, how do you get them to make the first move?
Yeah, so I'll take the first part I'll address is the question around should the vision come from the top or should it come from within the organization? And the answer is it needs to start at the board level, right? Creating that long-term vision. Where are we going? What are we going to be in the future and how are we going to get there? And then that needs to cascade down. And so the board and the executive management team is really responsible for creating that compelling what. How you get there, right? The journey that you'll go on to get there, that's when you go down the organization and you start, getting their thoughts and getting their ideas. The thing we need to be careful of is how we go into organizations and ask them how we get there, because it's kind of like this. If someone walked into the room right now and stood up here and said, excuse me, Mr. Hafner, I just, excuse me, red wine, white wine, or what? Red wine, white wine, or what? Red wine. And we went around the room. About 30 minutes from now, we'd all be sitting here going, where's the wine? Where's my water? Right? Now, nobody promised you wine or water. I took a poll. I asked your opinion. Right?
You're being shocked.
We set an expectation. And so the frustration starts with when we think about asking the organization where they want to go, what they want to do. And when they don't see their response reflected in the vision, right? We roll out the grand vision and we have the town hall meetings and we produce the corporate videos and we change the color of the carpeting because the colors mean a different part of the story of our journey and all of this grand stuff. When they don't see their thoughts incorporated in where the organization is going, they feel disenfranchised. They feel like they haven't been listened to. So we also need to be thinking about how can we, and is there a way to use technology to go back and tell the people, really appreciate your idea. Understand, here's where we're going. And the reason why we're choosing not to go down this path at this time is X, Y, and Z. Suddenly, a couple of things happen. One, you acknowledge that I've been hurt. Thank you very much. So one, I've been hurt. And I am now much more educated about where the organization is going and how we make decisions. So there's a lot of, build a coalition, go out and get everyone's opinion. And we need to do that. But we need to be aware that oftentimes simply asking someone their opinion can set an expectation. And so we need to think about how to manage those expectations. And in terms of level of discontent, the analogy I use is there comes a point, there's all the great feel-good books that say, everyone needs to come on board, everyone needs to be on the journey. The reality of life is this, is that in general, there's two types of people in the world. There are clock builders and there are timekeepers. And we need both. There's nothing wrong with being either. And recognizing who the clock builders are and who the timekeepers are is critically important. You probably won't get all the timekeepers on board because respectfully, look, I come in here, I twist this dial 3 times on the assembly line with every product that comes by. I do it well, I do it all the time. Don't talk to me about purpose, just make sure you pay me on time. And my passion might lie somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with that. Someone soldering components on a medical device assembly line is not someone I want getting creative and innovative, thinking about the out of the box, failing fast, none of that stuff, right? We need those people. And they're probably going to be fine with going any direction the organization goes. But then there are the clock builders, the people who you do need to capture their hearts and minds, and you need to start thinking about, right, so what is it that they're discontent with? I haven't encountered too many organizations where people say everything is fine. Now, when they do that, right, if anybody's gone through an IT system change, right, everybody will tell you how terrible the technology is until you announce you're going to change it. Then they tell you how you can't possibly change it, right? So they'll go through those waves, but we need to personalize the level of discontent. So the discontent can't be corporate performance in terms of revenue, growth, or profits. It has to come down to the functional level. So spending more time thinking about what that level of discontent is at the employee level, very similar to what marketing does in terms of trying to get to different customer segments.
Chris?
Yes.
Chris, I really like your stories, but I have trouble with all of your stories. My trouble is about the mixture of cultural transformation and how far you want to go. All your stories, for example, like EY, I mean, everyone knows that EY is consulting firm. All the consultants have to go through their hardship. It's part of their life. Before you're becoming a partner, you have to go through. Now you're measuring their emotion, right? You're trying to analyze it, you're trying to help them before they jump past that barrier. That's the question, how far do you want to go? Netflix, same story. I had a story that I was told by a very senior guy. He was in an entertaining business, of course, and I can't really tell you the whole story because it would take hours, but the point is, he was advised by James Cameron in one of his meetings that you don't get the point. That's what he said, James said, all right? James said, going to a cinema, you need to see people. You need to get feeling of entertainment. You need to have Coke and popcorn. You need to buy merchandise. It's not just seeing a movie at home. So it's a question is about a cultural transformation. How far you want to go, right? So the whole story about digital transformation to me, it's part of a cycle. You need to go one cycle and then you probably get on to another cycle when time is needed. I don't know whether I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, and it's a question of it's the chicken and egg conundrum, right? Does the transformation drive a change in culture and behavior? Does the change in culture and behavior help drive the transformation? And there's no one right answer. It depends on the situation, what you're trying to transform. How do you get consumers to change their behavior? How do you get employees to change their behavior? Because oftentimes, we have strategy and we have structure, our organization, and you have culture. And when we take the strategy and we say, this is our strategy, it's our new strategy, right? And what very quickly follows that, here's the new org structure. Then we talk about the culture, very rarely. And then the times where we feel that the most is typically mergers and acquisitions. Right? You're the acquired company, or you acquired a company. You announce the rationale for the acquisition, what we're going to be able to do as a result of that. You announce the new org structure, and it's the clash of the culture is left behind. So it's always about, it's the internal culture. Part of the shift is how do we incent people? And when I say incent people, I don't mean just financial incentive. We oftentimes think that's what it's all about. It's the financial incentive. And make no mistake, people are very concerned about the income that they are going to make. But you will incent both. But you should be aware of, at any given time in your organization, your business life cycle, which are you incenting more? Behaviors or outcomes? If you're trying to go through transformation, you need to shift away from outcomes and more heavily incent behaviors. And then when you get the right behaviors, then you can start to shift to more mature business thinking, which is then incenting outcomes, versus growth business thinking, which is changing behaviors. And incentives don't have to be financial. In fact, there's some research that says a salary increase lasts about 35 days in terms of incentivizing an employee. But sometimes non-monetary rewards, recognition, can go much longer way. Right? Celebrating success, identifying when workers do a really good job at something, when it doesn't have to be financial. So be thinking about how your incentive plans align with your transformation efforts, behaviors or outcomes. If you're still measuring the old KPIs, you're asking people to do something different, you're incenting them to stick with you.
Chris, my question is, you said that the digital transformation is not about technologies, okay? But in your case, either the Netflix, the potato chip, or the advisor firm, something like that. All the process, the digitalization, is because of the technologies. So if we don't have cannot foresee that the technology can change or can improve something like that, it's not kick off. So my question is, you still believe that the technology is come later, but the technology is the one who can the kicker point that to make everything start. So it means that the CEO or the management, they will have to have that, the foresee of the technologies.
Yeah, so the technology is only the enabler. Right? It is not what's going to make you successful. It's the vision for what can we do different in a digitized and digitalized world. How might we work different? How might we operate differently? What functions do we need to keep internally? What functions might we outsource or partner with? What behaviors do we have to change internally, externally, consumers? So that it's not that it's you have to have the technology, but if you think of digital transformation, and I'm not a fan of handing that to the CIO. I'm not necessarily a great fan of creating digital transformation, chief digital transformation officers. I heard Accenture last year saying organizations need a chief artificial intelligence officer. The board, the executive suite's going to be bigger than the biggest room in the building. This is ridiculous. It's not about the technology. Respectfully, for the technology folks in the room, technology is easy. It works. Typically works all the time, right? If it doesn't work, it's a line of code. We go, we fix it, and we make it work. It's how do I pull all these pieces together? What value am I creating as a result of it? And why am I doing this? And that responsibility sits at the board and executive management team level. The technology is simply enabled. Yes, please.
Right. The question is almost like the cultural, but in the way of adoption. So from your experience working with many companies, organizations, what are the adoption compared to each country in terms of digital transformation? And the second question is about the time, how long does it take from digitization to digitalization and the whole transformation, like example for how long does it take for the whole process?
So digitization, I can't give an exact frame of reference in terms of time, but digitization is typically the easiest. But it can be quite daunting and expensive. At United States Steel, it was about a £90 million effort to get all of our analog blueprints into CAD format. It was painful. And it's not just getting them from one format to another. It's, do I have the right print? And is everything that was done to that equipment reflected in that print? Because if I'm going to digitize it, I want to make sure I have the most current information. So you need to go on that journey, but you don't have to digitize everything in the organization before you can start to look at digitalization opportunities. So in terms of how long does it take, it depends on, if you're trying to do it at an organizational level. At a functional level, you can get some pretty quick wins. 3 to 6 months. In a medical device company, we transformed customer service operations in about 6 weeks by using optical character recognition and natural language processing technology and robotic process automation. It really depends on the size of the organization, the function you're going after. On the other hand, working with Egypt as a country, that's a multi-decade endeavor, as it will be here in Thailand at a national level. Because it's not just about your organizations, it's about are the right policies, legal protections in place. Yes, please.
Well, maybe true that technology may be the enabler. A few years ago, I received a letter from one university from New Zealand we are going paperless. Please do not send us the letter anymore. And I was wondering what's going to do next. I took computer in the mid-60s. By 1967, I was computer illiterate. And after that, I never used the computer anymore. Until 1980, late 70, early 80. Vice Chancellor of the National University of Singapore gave me a notice that you better learn how to use email. I ignored him until University of Indonesia. If you do not know how to use email, you'll be in trouble. After that, I have to learn. Now, believe it or not, I talked to Vice Chancellor of the National University President in the region. Some university presidents are so afraid of using the computer. They say they have problem managing the browser alone. Yeah. So what happened is, because the younger generation, the University of Malaysia Vice Chancellor, they said, well, the younger generation knows, but we don't know. So what happened is, university president asking the younger generation to teach them. But the younger generation, well, they're too stupid. The older people, they don't know how to handle that. Yeah. So the thing is, if you say technology don't enable what we have to know basics. So I need, in the early 80s, I had to ask the secretary to tell me how to use the email. Or else, we're in the, well, someone will say, we are the saddest voice. Why do we need until we really need that? So it's a matter of, you need a basic skill. And the question is, how do we catch up with the product life cycle is much shorter every day. I mean, how do we keep up? We have someone who studied bachelor degree in computer and master degree in computer and PhD in computer. And yet that person told me he or she cannot keep up with the younger generation. The thing is how, and they said, well, she wanted teaching marketing. I said, no, I cannot let you teach computer because you graduate 3 degrees in computer, you don't want to teach marketing. I said, at the Commission on Higher Education, we cannot let you teach a course that you never studied. So the thing is, I mean, even people study computer for the last 20 years, and yet they don't keep up, you cannot keep up with it. So how would you handle that?
So, if I may ask, is complying with the law important for your organization? Right? We have to comply with the law, and the law is always changing. So we probably have someone on our board who knows a lot about the law. Finance is very important, right? And accounting rules and regulation in a globalized world, we probably need somebody with a strong finance background. Technology isn't about just writing lines of code. And it isn't about how devices are built and how the computation is done. The machines do that and do that very well. It's the application of that technology. So how many of you have a digital native who understands technology at your boards? So it's not necessarily that I have to learn all this. I just need someone who knows it and can challenge my thinking. So think about bolstering your board with someone from that younger generation that really understands technology. They grew up around it. For them, and they would tell you, email, are you kidding me? I never use email anymore. It's all about messaging. So that's one aspect. The other is a concept we call reverse mentoring. So mentoring, everybody familiar with the concept of mentoring? I'm the 50-plus-year-old seasoned, experienced person, and I'm going to take this young, up-and-coming individual, and I'm going to give all my knowledge to them. Right? Mentoring. Reverse mentoring says, actually, You know what? I don't really know much about Instagram, social influencers. In the UK, if you're under 30, you don't clean your flat. You hinge your flat. Now, I'm like, what is that? Well, Mrs. Hinch is an Instagram sensation, and she posts videos of herself cleaning. Now, my first question was, what is she wearing? That she has millions of followers. No, legit. It's a shot of her holding a squeegee and her hands sweeping the stairs and she's talking about how he gets all the small bits of dirt to the surface before you move to the stair. And so product companies seek her to use their products on Instagram. Right? She has this mass following, and her account is at Mrs. Hinch. And so this generation refers to cleaning as, well, I gotta hinch up the flat this week. I have a guest over. I don't know much about Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't have a Facebook account. I think those days are over. I don't have an Instagram account. I don't really understand it. So the only place I'm typically going to learn about it is from my children. And you know how much they want to tell me about technology. Right? They don't want to be the IT help desk for dad. And so think about reverse mentoring. Getting some of those digital natives in your organization and creating that same, confidential relationship between mentor and mentee that can help those more experienced people in the organization understand what's really happening out in that world of the Gen Z, the millennials, and the digital natives. Reverse mentoring is a great technique. It can really help us shape our thinking and challenge our thought. But it needs to be done formally, it needs to be done in an environment that encourages healthy challenge and thinking.
Okay, and we have a round of applause to our guest speaker here, please. I'd like to thank you, our guest speaker, Chris, for useful information, for your supporting us as always, and to Kasikon Bank, PTT, and the Siam Smith for supporting this event. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have found this activity informative and useful. The presentation will be uploaded on our website later, so you can have it for your reference. And before we leave, as usual, please fill in the evaluation here from the QR code here by scanning or on the way out on the table.
Do we need to digitize first?
We value and appreciate your feedback and will use it to evaluate changes and make improvements in our site. And our next coming activities. Do we get the QR code? Okay, we have more on the way back outside. And our next activity, the DCP series. In the topic of when is the right time to IPO on June 24th at IoT member space, Quezon. This will be conducted in Thai. And another one is the Independent Director Forum with the topic of tips and tricks for dealing with questions in an AGM at the Crystal Box 19th floor at Quezon Plaza. And this is on June 24th as well, but in the afternoon. And next activity, Director Briefing, Strategic Foresight with Dr. Tanai Sharing-san on June 25th. The venue will be confirmed later. We'd like to thank you again for your participation and contributions. We look forward to seeing you again next activity. And on the way back, please return the badge on the way out. And have a nice day, everyone. Sawadee ka.